The acrid smell of burnt toast permeated Liam Hayes's pristine white kitchen, mingling with the bitterness of his third cup of coffee. He stood motionless, staring at the blackened remnants of what should have been his breakfast. At 42, Liam wasn't wealthy, but he carved out a comfortable existence as a senior software developer at Techcore Solutions. His real work, however, happened in the dead of night. Endless hours spent crafting intricate code for his wife's on-demand fashion tech startup, Styleverse. The sound of heels clicking against tile broke his concentration as Anya burst into the kitchen, a whirlwind of designer perfume and determined energy. Her sharp features were accentuated by perfectly applied makeup, and her dark hair was styled in an elegant updo that spoke of careful preparation. "Liam, where's my presentation binder?" she demanded, rifling through the stack of papers on the counter. "And please tell me you called about the catering for the launch event." Liam reached beneath a pile of documents and extracted a black leather binder. "Right here," he said, his voice steady despite the exhaustion weighing on him. "The catering is confirmed for next Thursday. I handled it yesterday." "What about the venue's lighting setup?" Julian Vance inquired. "Done," Liam interrupted, a slight edge creeping into his tone at the mention of the investor's name. "I coordinated with the technical team last week." Anya paused her frantic movement and finally looked at her husband, her expression softening momentarily. But there was something calculated in her gaze. "What would I do without you?" she asked rhetorically. Liam remembered when those eyes had shone with genuine admiration rather than casual dismissal. 7 years ago, at a local tech meetup where they first met, Anya had been captivated by his quiet intelligence and technical expertise. She had approached him after his presentation on AI algorithms with sincere curiosity and measured ambition. "You'd manage," he replied, his words carrying more weight than she realized. "You always do," Anya said. Her phone buzzed, and she grabbed it immediately. A smile spread across her face as she read the message. "Julian secured another potential investor," she announced, her voice taking on that breathless quality it always did when discussing her business partner. Liam observed how her entire demeanor changed at the mention of Julian Vance. The venture capitalist had entered their lives a year ago, bringing with him the capital that Styleverse desperately needed. Since then, Anya's late nights at the office had become more frequent, her explanations more vague, her touches more perfunctory. "What about the code review we scheduled for this morning?" Liam asked, keeping his voice neutral despite the anger simmering beneath the surface. "The AI recommendation engine still needs fine-tuning before the launch." Anya waved her hand dismissively. "Can't we do it tonight? This investor could be crucial for our expansion plans." "Our expansion plans," Liam repeated quietly, noting how naturally the word slipped from her lips when referring to her work with Julian. "Of course, go ahead." She grabbed her designer bag and car keys, barely sparing him a glance. "Don't forget to pick up my dry cleaning, darling. The black Valentino dress needs to be ready for Thursday's presentation." As she rushed toward the door, Liam called out, "Anya." She turned, impatience written across her features. "Are we still on for dinner tonight?" "Oh, I might be late." "Don't wait up." The door closed behind her with a definitive click. Liam stood in the kitchen, the bitter scent of burnt toast now mixed with the lingering traces of her expensive perfume. He picked up his phone and opened his secure email account, one that Anya knew nothing about. 3 new messages from his private investigator detailed her movements over the past week: lengthy lunch meetings, late-night strategy sessions, and a telling photograph of her and Julian entering an upscale hotel downtown. The unease that had been building in his chest solidified into something colder, harder. Liam Hayes wasn't a man who acted on impulse or emotion. His strength lay in his ability to analyze, to plan, and to execute with precision. He opened his laptop and began typing, accessing the back end of Styleverse systems through the administrator credentials he built into the platform. A notification popped up on his screen, a message from Julian to Anya sent just minutes ago. "Can't wait to share our vision with the new investors." You're incredible. A dinner tonight. Liam's fingers hovered over the keyboard. In the 7 years of their marriage, he had never once raised his voice to Anya, never shown her the steel beneath his quiet exterior. She had mistaken his silence for weakness, his support for subservience. Julian had made the same mistake, viewing him as nothing more than a skilled programmer to be used and discarded. They would learn. The morning progressed with Liam methodically documenting every interaction between Anya and Julian. A financial transaction here, a late-night message there. He had been gathering evidence for months, building a digital fortress of information that would prove devastating when deployed. His phone buzzed with updates from his PI, each one confirming what he already knew. His wife was slipping away, not through any failure on his part, but through her own choice, her own betrayal. At his office in Techcore Solutions, Liam maintained his usual routine. He attended meetings, reviewed code, and mentored junior developers. Nobody would have guessed that beneath his unassuming exterior, he was orchestrating the beginning of an elaborate revenge. His colleagues saw only the quiet, brilliant coder they'd always known. "Hey, Liam." Sarah from HR stopped by his desk. "How's the startup coming along? Must be exciting times with the launch coming up." Liam gave her a measured smile. "Very exciting. Everything's falling into place." Sarah nodded enthusiastically. "She's lucky to have you supporting her like this. Not many husbands would put in so much extra work for their wife's dream." "I believe in supporting the people I care about," Liam replied carefully. "And I believe in consequences for those who take that support for granted." Sarah's smile faltered slightly at his tone, but she quickly recovered. "Well, you two are an inspiration. Hope to see you both at the launch event." As she walked away, Liam returned to his work, his expression unchanged. On his screen, lines of code scrolled past, not Techcore projects, but a sophisticated program designed to monitor and control Styliverse's entire infrastructure. He built backdoors into every system and created hidden triggers that would activate with a single command. The day wore on, and Liam received no messages from Anya. At 6, he packed up his things and drove home, stopping to pick up her dry cleaning as requested. The house was dark when he arrived, exactly as he'd expected. He hung up her Valentino dress and went to his home office, where he spent the next several hours finalizing his preparations. At 11, the front door opened. Anya's laughter drifted up the stairs, followed by a deeper voice that made Liam's hands pause on the keyboard. He listened as 2 sets of footsteps entered the house, moving toward the kitchen. The sound of clinking glasses, more laughter, and murmured conversations filled the space. Liam stood silently and moved to the top of the stairs, remaining in the shadows. Through the open kitchen door, he could see Anya and Julian standing close together, wine glasses in hand. Julian's arm was around her waist, his face bent close to her ear as he whispered something that made her giggle. "We should be careful," Anya was saying, though she made no move to step away from Julian. "Your pet programmer. Please, he's probably still at the office, coding away like a good little husband. He is rather pathetic, isn't he?" Julian laughed dismissively. "Desperate to please, so boring. Unlike you, Julian." Anya's voice carried clearly up the stairs. "You deserve better than him, darling. Someone who understands your ambition, your fire." Once Julian pulled her closer, his hands possessively on her hips. She tilted her face up to his. "I can't wait." Their kiss was passionate and uninhibited, full of the fire that had been missing from Anya's interactions with Liam for months. He observed them with clinical detachment, memorizing every detail of their betrayal. Then, as silent as a shadow, he returned to his office and opened his laptop. His fingers flew across the keyboard as he activated the first phase of his plan. Deep within the Styliverse systems, carefully planted protocols began to execute. By morning, the first cracks would appear in Anya and Julian's perfect world. They thought him weak, submissive, easily discarded. They would soon discover just how wrong they were. In the kitchen below, Anya and Julian continued their intimate conversation, unaware that their future was already beginning to unravel. Liam Hayes, the quiet coder and devoted husband, smiled in the darkness of his office. The time for silence was over. Now it was time for action. Later that evening, Liam prepared dinner with meticulous attention to detail. The kitchen counter displayed all the ingredients for Anya's favorite pie: saffron threads, frozen ice, fresh seafood, and vegetables precisely chopped and arranged. He had spent hours perfecting this dish over the years, learning to cook it exactly as she liked it. The irony wasn't lost on him that this would be the last meal he'd ever cook for her. His phone buzzed with a message from his PI. Subject A and Subject J had been spotted leaving the office together. Attached was a photo of Anya and Julian in his Mercedes, her hand resting intimately on his thigh as he drove. Liam pocketed his phone and continued cooking, his movements precise and controlled. The house filled with the rich aroma of saffron and garlic. He had set the dining room table with their best china, crystal wine glasses catching the light from the overhead chandelier. At precisely 7:45, he heard the sound of car doors closing outside. 2 sets of footsteps approached the front door, accompanied by low voices and muffled laughter. Liam remained in the kitchen, stirring the pella as the door opened. "Liam." Anya's voice carried a note of surprise. "You're home early." She stood in the kitchen doorway, wearing a dress he'd never seen before, something refined and expensive-looking that spoke more of Julian's taste than her own. Behind her, Julian loomed with his usual air of casual superiority, one hand resting possessively on Anya's lower back. "I thought we could have dinner together," Liam said, his voice steady. "It's been a while since we had time to talk." Anya's expression flickered between annoyance and false sympathy. "Oh, darling. I should have called. Julian and I need to go over some last-minute details for the launch. We brought work home." "I can see that," Liam replied, his gaze shifting to Julian's hand on his wife's back. "Perhaps Mr. Vance would like to join us for dinner. I've made plenty." Julian's smile was predatory and confident. "That's very kind of you, Hayes. Something smells delicious." They settled in the dining room, a triangle of tension and unspoken truths. Liam served the pella while watching Anya and Julian exchange furtive glances over their wine glasses. The conversation revolved around Styliverse's upcoming launch, projected figures, marketing strategies, and the celebrity endorsements they had secured. "The AI recommendation engine is truly revolutionary," Julian said in a patronizing tone. "Your husband's coding skills have been adequate for the development phase, but of course, we'll need to bring in more experienced developers as we scale up." Anya nodded eagerly. "Julian has already identified several top-tier development teams we could work with. They have experience with major fashion brands." "I see," Liam said quietly. "And when were you planning to discuss this with me?" "Oh, darling." Anya laughed, a brittle and false sound. "You know I value your contribution, but Styliverse needs to grow. We can't rely on a single developer forever." Julian's phone rang, and he excused himself to take the call in the living room. As soon as he was out of sight, Anya turned to Liam, her expression hardening. "What are you playing at? This little domestic scene, it's pathetic." Liam took a sip of his wine and watched her over the rim of his glass. "Is it pathetic to want to have dinner with my wife? Your wife?" Anya's laugh was cruel and unrestrained. "Let me be clear, Liam. You're nothing but a stepping stone, a convenient resource I've outgrown. Julian understands me, understands my ambition. He's everything you're not. Successful, powerful, exciting, and he's my lover." Liam's voice remained calm. "My lover." His eyes had turned to ice. "Did you really think I could be satisfied with a nobody like you, a mere programmer living off my success?" "Your success." Liam's voice stayed steady. "But my success was built on my code, my algorithms, my sleepless nights." "Please," Anya scoffed. "You're just the help. Liam, Julian and I are the ones with vision, real power. You're an embarrassment as a husband, and frankly, I'm tired of pretending otherwise. Julian returned, catching the tail end of her statement. He smirked as he moved to stand behind her chair. No hard feelings, Hayes. Business is business, and love goes to the strongest player, doesn't it? Liam stood slowly, his movements deliberate and controlled. Both Anya and Julian tensed, perhaps expecting an outburst of wounded pride. Instead, Liam merely picked up his wine glass and raised it in a mock toast. To the strongest player, he said softly, his eyes never leaving her face. May you both get exactly what you deserve. He set down his glass and walked out of the dining room, leaving them to their victory celebration. In his office, he initiated the next phase of his plan, a series of commands executed silently, setting in motion the digital avalanche that would bury their dreams. By morning, Styliverse's funding would be gone, their investor connections severed, and their reputations in tatters. But that would only be the beginning. Liam Hayes had spent months preparing for this moment, building a web of digital traps and financial time bombs that would systematically destroy everything Anya and Julian held dear. They had thought him weak, dismissed him as merely the help. They were about to discover that they had gravely underestimated the quiet man behind the computer screen. Liam wasn't just a coder. He was an architect of destruction, and he had designed their downfall with the same precision he had used to build their success. As he gathered his essential belongings and prepared to leave the house for the last time, he could hear their laughter from the dining room, the sound of expensive wine being poured, and their voices raised in confident discussion of future plans. Liam smiled in the darkness of his office. Let them laugh. Let them celebrate. Their world will begin to crumble with the morning sun, and they will learn that betrayal carries a price they aren't prepared to pay. The quiet coder was gone. In his place stood a man of cold purpose and calculated vengeance, ready to remind them that the most dangerous predators are often the ones who strike in silence. Liam moved through the darkened house with quiet purpose, gathering the essential items he had prepared days in advance: his laptop, external drives containing backups of crucial data, and a small selection of clothes carefully packed in a bag. In his home office, he initiated a secure deletion protocol on his desktop computer, erasing any trace of his recent activities. The sounds of Anya and Julian's continued celebration drifted up from below, their voices growing louder and more animated with each glass of wine. Every giggle, every intimate murmur, every subtle sound of their betrayal strengthened his resolve. He accessed his laptop one final time, connecting to a private server he had established months ago. The screen displayed a complex array of monitoring systems, financial trackers, email interceptors, and data collection protocols, all focused on Styliverse, Julian's business empire, and their personal communications. You should see this, Hayes. Julian's voice carried up the stairs. Your wife is absolutely magnificent when she's not pretending to care about your feelings. More laughter followed. Julian, darling, you're terrible, but you're right. It's so liberating to finally be honest, came Anya's reply. Liam's fingers moved across the keyboard, initiating the first phase of his plan. He designed the program to execute in stages, each one calculated to inflict maximum damage while preserving his anonymity. The initial strike would target Styliverse's financial infrastructure, severing key connections and redirecting funds through a maze of untraceable transactions. A soft ping from his phone confirmed the execution of his commands. In less than 8 hours, their digital empire would begin to crumble. But Liam wasn't finished. He opened another program. This one focused on Julian's personal accounts and business dealings. The venture capitalists' carefully constructed facade of success concealed a network of questionable transactions and manipulated records. Liam had spent months mapping these connections, identifying vulnerabilities, and planting digital time bombs throughout the system. He shouldered his bag, took one final look around the office where he had spent countless nights building the very tools that would now serve his revenge. The irony wasn't lost on him. They had used his skills, his dedication, his intelligence to construct their success, never realizing he was simultaneously engineering their destruction. From downstairs came the sound of breaking glass, followed by Anya's surprised squeal, and Julian's deep laughter. "Don't worry about the mess, darling," Julian said. "We'll hire someone to clean up. That's what money is for, isn't it?" Liam moved silently down the hallway, passing the bedroom he had shared with Anya for 7 years. Through the open door, he could see evidence of her gradual separation. Designer clothes he had never seen, expensive jewelry that hadn't come from him, subtle signs of a life she had been building without him. He paused at the top of the stairs, listening to their conversation. "When should we tell the board about the management changes?" Anya asked, her voice thick with wine and satisfaction. Julian replied smugly, "After the launch, once we've secured additional funding, we'll restructure the development team. Your husband's code is adequate for now, but we'll need real professionals to take Stylovers to the next level." "He's been useful," Anya agreed dismissively. "But really, Julian, the way he moves about, always trying to please me, always so eager to help. It's embarrassing. You should see him at industry events, standing in corners, barely speaking to anyone, as if a mere programmer could understand our vision." "Poor little coder," Julian mocked. "Don't worry, we'll let him down gently. A nice severance package, perhaps. Though given your prenup, he'll hardly be in a position to complain." Their laughter mingled again, echoing through the house. Liam descended the stairs silently, passing the kitchen where they sat surrounded by empty wine bottles and the remains of the dinner he had prepared. Neither noticed his presence. They were too absorbed in their own perceived triumph. He slipped out through the side door, closing it without a sound. The night air was cool against his face as he walked to his car, parked a block away as planned. Inside the vehicle, he opened his laptop one final time, accessing the home security system he had modified weeks ago. On the screen, he could see Anya and Julian in the kitchen, their positions now more intimate, their celebration becoming increasingly passionate. Liam's expression remained neutral as he initiated the recording protocol. Every moment of their betrayal would be documented, every cruel word and intimate gesture preserved for future use. They thought they were celebrating their victory, never suspecting they were actually documenting their own downfall. He started the car and drove away from the house, away from the life he had built with Anya, away from the facade of contentment he had maintained for so long. His destination was a small private workspace he had rented months ago under a false name, paid for in cash, so its existence remained unknown to anyone in his regular life. The workspace was sparse but functional, equipped with everything he needed to execute his plans. Multiple monitors displayed real-time data feeds, tracking systems, and surveillance protocols. Here, in this anonymous space, he would orchestrate their destruction with the same precision and attention to detail that had characterized his coding work. As he settled into his chair and began configuring his systems, Liam allowed himself a moment of reflection. The quiet, supportive husband was gone, replaced by something colder and more dangerous. They had mistaken his silence for weakness, his patience for submission, and that mistake would cost them everything. His phone buzzed with a notification. Anya was attempting to access their joint account. She would find it unchanged for now, unaware of the financial devastation awaiting her in the morning. Another notification showed Julian sending a late-night email to his investors, full of promises and projections that would soon be revealed as lies. Liam began typing, his fingers moving with practiced precision as he set up the next phase of his plan. On one screen, Styloverse's code scrolled past, his creation now repurposed as a weapon. On another, Julian's financial records revealed their secrets, each transaction a potential landmine waiting to be triggered. They thought they knew him. They thought they understood what he was capable of. By the time the sun rose, they would begin to learn just how wrong they were. The quiet coder had become something else entirely, a silent architect of chaos, a patient predator waiting to strike. As the night deepened, Liam continued his work, each keystroke bringing him closer to his goal. In the distance, the city slept, unaware that in this unremarkable building, a man was orchestrating an intricate symphony of revenge. His silence masked a determination that would reshape lives and destroy empires. The first act of their drama was ending. Tomorrow would bring the beginning of their nightmare. But for now, Liam worked in silence, his face illuminated by the glow of multiple screens. The time for patience was over. The time for retribution had begun. Styleverse's collapse hit the tech and fashion industries like a digital bomb. Within hours of the funding disappearance, major tech blogs began publishing speculative pieces about the company's sudden downfall. Investors who had eagerly backed the venture just days before now refused to take calls from either Anya or Julian. In her penthouse apartment, Anya paced frantically, phone pressed to her ear as she tried desperately to reach anyone who might help salvage her crumbling empire. The sleek designer furniture and modern art pieces that had once symbolized her success now felt like props in a play that had ended abruptly. "What do you mean you can't trace the transactions?" She snapped into the phone. "I'm paying you to fix this." On the other end, the IT security consultant explained, "Mrs. Hayes, these transfers were executed through a series of ghost protocols. Whoever did this knew exactly what they were doing. The money's gone." Then finally, she demanded, her voice cracking, "He has to be behind this. We've tried everything. Your husband's digital footprint has vanished completely. His work email is deactivated, his social media accounts are gone, and his phone number is disconnected. He's operating on a level of technical expertise that's impressive." Anya ended the call and hurled her phone across the room, the screen cracking against the wall and adding another fracture to her already shattered world. Her phone buzzed again, a journalist requesting comment on Styleverse's collapse. She ignored it. The intercom chimed, "Ms. Hayes, there's a delivery for you." Minutes later, Anya stared at a thick manila envelope on her coffee table. Inside, she found meticulously prepared divorce papers awaiting her signature, accompanied by a note in Liam's precise handwriting. "You said I was living off your success. Now we'll see how well you do without mine." Her hands trembling, she called Julian's office. His secretary's voice was cold. "Mr. Vance is not taking calls at this time." Desperate, Anya reached out to Liam's friends. She started with David Chin, a senior developer who had worked with Liam for years. "Please, David," she begged, "I just need to talk to him. Like you talked to him the night you destroyed his life." David's voice was laced with contempt. "You called him worthless, Anya. You mocked him in his own home while your lover smirked. Did you think we wouldn't find out? You don't understand." "I understand perfectly." Liam shared the security footage with me. "The entire tech community has seen who you really are." "Don't call me again," he said. One by one, Anya's attempts to reach Liam's circle met with similar rejections. Each refusal stripped away another layer of her carefully constructed facade. The woman who had prided herself on her networking abilities now found herself increasingly isolated. In desperation, she tracked down Margaret Hayes' phone number. Liam's mother had always been kind to her, welcoming her into the family with open arms. "Margaret, it's Anya. I need your help reaching Liam," she pleaded. A long pause followed before Margaret spoke, her voice carrying a weight Anya had never heard before. "I watched my son pour his heart and soul into supporting your dreams, Anya. He worked himself to exhaustion building your company while you fell into another man's arms. Please, I can explain." "Explain?" Anya cried. "Explain calling my son worthless. Explain mocking him in his own home." "The security footage doesn't lie, Margaret. Please, I'm desperate." Margaret replied quietly. "When my husband died, and I had nothing, you taught him the same lesson all over again. But this time, He's the one in control. You made your bed, Anya. Now you get to lie alone. The line went dead, leaving Anya standing in her expensive apartment, surrounded by the trappings of success that were rapidly turning to ash. Her phone buzzed again. Another journalist, another investor pulling out, another piece of her world crumbling away. She opened her laptop, hoping to salvage something from Stylover's systems, only to be met with a single message: access denied. Below it, lines of code scrolled past, systematically erasing everything she had built. In the digital shadows, Liam watched through the backdoors he'd installed in her systems, noting each failed call and rejected plea. The quiet coder she had dismissed was now the architect of her isolation, and he was far from finished. Julian Vance's office in the financial district had always projected an image of power and success. Today that image was cracking. The venture capitalist paced behind his mahogany desk, phone pressed to his ear as another investor terminated their relationship. "This is a temporary setback," Julian insisted, his smooth confidence wavering. "Stylover's is just one project. My track record is questionable at best," the investor cut in. "We've received some concerning information about your previous ventures, Julian. The numbers don't add up. Until these issues are resolved, we're suspending all involvement." "What information? Who sent this?" Julian demanded before abruptly ending the call. He slammed the phone down, his carefully maintained composure slipping. His computer chimed with new email notifications, more investors pulling out, more questions about his financial practices, more cracks in his foundation. "Mr. Vance," a secretary's voice came through the intercom. "Miss Hayes is here again." Julian's jaw clenched. "Send her away. She's quite insistent." The office door burst open. Anya stormed in, her designer outfit wrinkled, and her makeup slightly smeared. The polished businesswoman of weeks past giving way to someone more desperate. "We need to talk about this," she demanded. "Everything's falling apart." Julian's laugh was harsh. "There's no way anymore, Anya. Your startup is dead. My investors are fleeing, and somehow your tech genius husband is behind it all." "He's not just behind Stylover's collapse," Anya said, her voice shaking. "Haven't you noticed? The rumors about your past deals, the anonymous tips to your investors, the leaked emails, it's all him." "Impossible. He's just a programmer who built our entire infrastructure, who had access to everything." Anya ran her hands through her perfectly styled hair in frustration. "Don't worry," Julian retorted, his laugh growing ugly. "At least be honest, Anya. You used him just like you tried to use me." "I didn't. I mean, you did," she spluttered. Julian turned back to his computer, dismissing her. "Get out of my office." "We're done here," he ordered. "Security, please escort Miss Hayes from the building, and do not let her back in." As security led her away, Anya caught a glimpse of Julian's computer screen. Text scrolled across it, lines of code systematically dismantling his digital empire. In that moment, she finally understood the true extent of Liam's capabilities and the depth of his vengeance. Later that evening, Julian sat in his darkened office, surrounded by the wreckage of his career. His phone had been ringing constantly, investors demanding explanations, partners pulling out of deals, journalists bombarding him with questions about irregularities in his past ventures. His computer chimed one final time as a new email appeared from an unknown sender. The message contained a single line: "You thought he was just a programmer. Now you know better." Attached were documents detailing years of financial manipulation, fraudulent reports, and illegal dealings. Secrets Julian had buried beneath his polished exterior. The recipient list included the SEC, his investors, and major financial news outlets. In his hidden workspace, Liam monitored the chaos through multiple screens. One showed Anya being escorted from Julian's building. Another displayed Julian's increasingly desperate attempts to contain the damage. A third tracked the steady dismantling of their digital infrastructure. He had orchestrated their isolation perfectly, Former lovers turning against each other, their alliance crumbling under the weight of their own betrayal. Ania's desperate calls for help went unanswered, and Julian's attempts to salvage his reputation were met with cold rejection. The quiet coder they had dismissed was now the puppet master, pulling strings they hadn't even known existed. And he was far from finished. The dimly lit workspace hummed with the sound of multiple computers running complex operations. Liam sat at his command center, monitoring the systematic destruction of Julian and Ania's lives. On one screen, financial records revealed the truth behind Julian's success, a house of cards built on manipulation and fraud. On another, Ania's increasingly desperate attempts to salvage her reputation played out in real time. A notification popped up, an email from his mother, Margaret. Unlike the others involved in this drama, she understood exactly what her son was capable of. The message was simple. "Are you sure about this path?" Liam's mind drifted back to his childhood, to the lessons that had shaped him into the man he was today. He remembered standing in the kitchen at age 12, watching his mother cry over overdue bills after his father's death. Daniel Hayes had been an honest man, a skilled machinist who believed in hard work and fair play. The company he had devoted 20 years to had discarded him like a broken tool, citing budget cuts while the executives awarded themselves bonuses. The accident that killed him happened on his way to yet another job interview. The insurance company had found a technicality to deny the claim, leaving Margaret and young Liam with nothing but debts and broken dreams. Margaret's voice echoed in his memory. "The world isn't fair, Liam, but that doesn't mean we let it break us." She had rebuilt their lives from nothing, starting a small bakery that eventually grew into a successful business. Young Liam had watched her work 18-hour days, negotiate with suppliers and banks, and learn the subtle art of turning adversity into advantage. Yet he had also learned another lesson, watching from the shadows as corporate lawyers dismantled their insurance claim. Knowledge was power, and in the digital age, knowledge lived in computers. While other kids played video games, Liam immersed himself in programming languages, network protocols, and system architecture. His high school counselor had told him, "There's more to life than computers," but Liam understood something fundamental. In a world increasingly dependent on digital systems, the person who controlled those systems controlled everything. He worked through nights and weekends, building his skills, creating tools and protocols that others couldn't even comprehend. By the time he met Ania at that tech meetup, he was already one of the most skilled coders in the industry. She had been attracted to his quiet confidence and unassuming brilliance, or so he had thought. The memory of their first meeting played across his mind. Ania, bright and ambitious, approaching him after his presentation on AI algorithms. "Your work is fascinating," she had said. He had fallen for her completely, pouring his heart and soul into helping her achieve her dreams. Even as she grew more distant and demanding, he had maintained his quiet support. The values his mother had instilled in him, loyalty, perseverance, integrity, had kept him by Ania's side. Now those same values demanded justice. Another message arrived from Margaret. "I remember what it did to your father, watching his dreams turn to ash. Just be sure this is about justice, not just revenge." Liam's fingers moved across the keyboard, initiating another phase of his plan. On the screens before him, Julian's financial empire continued to crumble, and Ania's desperate attempts to salvage her reputation were met with the digital walls he had carefully constructed. He had learned from his father's fate never to be powerless, and from his mother's strength never to show weakness. And now he would teach Ania and Julian the price of betrayal. The quiet coder they had dismissed was gone. In his place sat a digital predator, patient and precise, using their own systems against them. The skills he had developed over decades were now weapons in a war they hadn't even known they were fighting. Another notification appeared. Julian was attempting to access emergency funds from an offshore account. Liam's fingers danced across the keyboard, and those funds vanished into an untraceable digital void. He had mapped out Julian's entire financial network months ago, planting backdoors and triggers throughout the system. On another screen, Ania's latest email to potential investors bounced back undelivered. Her contact list had been subtly altered. Her messages rerouted through filters that ensured her pleas for help would never reach their intended recipients. The lessons of his past had shaped him into the perfect instrument of their destruction. His father's tragedy had taught him the importance of control, and his mother's resilience had shown him how to rise from the ashes. Now he would ensure that those who had betrayed him learned these lessons for themselves. Liam typed a response to his mother. "This isn't about revenge, it's about consequences." The computer hummed in agreement as another piece of Julian and Ania's world collapsed into digital dust. The quiet coder had become the architect of their destruction, and his work was far from complete. In his private workspace, Liam Hayes typed the final commands that would bring his plan to its climax. Multiple screens displayed the ruins of Julian and Ania's lives, their shattered reputations, drained accounts, and crumbling relationships. But that wasn't enough. They needed to face public humiliation to experience the same devastating exposure they had inflicted on him. His fingers moved across the keyboard as he crafted elegant, promising invitations. "An evening of new beginnings. You are cordially invited to an exclusive networking event at Ravenwood Manor, where the past meets future opportunities." Liam sent the invitations through various shell companies and fake email accounts. The guest list included Julian's former investors, Ania's business contacts, and key figures from the tech and fashion industries. He knew their desperation would drive them to attend, seeking any chance to rebuild their ruined lives. His phone buzzed. A message from his private investigator. "Both targets have received the invitations. They're making calls, trying to verify the authenticity." Liam opened his surveillance feeds. In her now modest apartment, Ania clutched the invitation like a lifeline. Her designer clothes were gone, replaced by simple attire that spoke of her financial downfall. She was on the phone, her voice carrying a note of desperate hope. "Yes, I received the invitation. No, I understand your concerns, but this could be our chance to start fresh. The host seems legitimate. They're offering to connect struggling entrepreneurs with new investors." In his office, Julian also studied the invitation. His once immaculate space now showed signs of decline. Empty bottles on the desk, papers scattered about. He barked orders into his phone. "Find out who's behind this. I don't care how. Just do it. This might be our only shot at salvaging something from this mess." Liam switched to another screen to examine the preparations at Ravenwood Manor. He had purchased the property through a series of shell companies, ensuring no connection could be traced back to him. The renovations were complete, hidden cameras installed throughout, a sophisticated sound system, and multiple projection screens concealed behind elegant drapery. His security team, hired through discreet channels, reported that the technical setup was ready. Digital projectors, audio systems, and a command center established in a hidden room overlooking the main ballroom. A message from one of his automated systems confirmed. Financial tracking indicates both targets are depleting remaining resources to prepare for the event. Estimated attendance probability, 98%. Lion allowed himself a small smile as he reviewed the evidence he had accumulated. Emails between Ania and Julian plotting against him. Security footage from their home showing their cruel dismissal of his contributions, and financial records revealing their attempts to cut him out of style versus success. He had compiled it all into a devastating presentation. The truth would be revealed not in private messages or whispered rumors, but on giant screens before the industry leaders they had so desperately tried to impress. A message from his mother glowed on his phone. "Are you sure this is the path you want to take?" Liam typed his response. "You chose this path when you decided to betray me. Now you'll face the consequences." He returned to his preparations, checking each element of his plan. The masquerade theme would add another layer of irony, masks hiding faces until the moment of revelation. The security staff had their instructions, and the digital systems were primed and ready. In their separate locations, Ania and Julian prepared for what they thought would be their chance at redemption, neither suspecting that their networking opportunity would become their final humiliation. The pieces were in place. The trap was set. All that remained was for his targets to walk willingly into their own destruction. Guests arrived at Ravenwood Manor in their finest attire, each face concealed behind an ornate mask that created an atmosphere of mystery and possibility. The grand ballroom sparkled with crystal chandeliers, while hidden cameras recorded every moment. In his control room, Liam watched through multiple monitors as Julian entered wearing an expensive suit that couldn't quite hide his recent decline. His golden mask, an ironic choice for a man whose own facade had begun to crack, gleamed under the lights. Minutes later, Ania appeared in a borrowed dress that Liam recognized from a desperate email she had sent to a former fashion contact. Her silver mask could not conceal the tension in her movements as she scanned the room for potential allies. "Begin Phase 1, Liam commanded through his secure communication system. The hidden speakers came to life, playing soft music as champagne flowed. On his screens, he observed his targets attempting to network. Their desperate attempts at charm fell flat as former associates made excuses to move away. Julian approached a group of investors, his voice forced with confidence. "The current situation is unfortunate, but I'm already developing new opportunities," he said. One investor spoke up. "We've been meaning to ask about some irregularities our forensic accountants discovered in your previous ventures," before Julian could respond. Suddenly, the music faded. The ballroom lights dimmed as hidden panels slid open, revealing massive screens. A digitally modified voice announced, "Welcome to tonight's entertainment." The screens flickered to life, displaying emails between Ania and Julian dating back months before Styliverse's collapse. Their cruel comments about Liam, their plans to push him out, their mockery of his contributions. Guests filled the room as evidence mounted. Security footage showed their intimate moments in the office, secret meetings, plotting, calculated betrayal. Financial records revealed systematic fraud and Ania's willing participation in the scheme. A hush fell over the room as the screen switched to audio recordings. Julian's voice was heard saying, "Once we've stripped the company's assets, we'll blame the collapse on incompetence. No one questions the technical staff when ventures fail." Then came Ania's voice, dripping with contempt. "Liam's such a fool. He actually believes I love him. As if I could ever respect a mere programmer." The guests began removing their masks, turning to stare at the exposed conspirators. Julian tried to maintain control, shouting, "This is a fabrication. Someone is trying to destroy us." But then Liam's clear, unwavering voice came through the speakers. "Just truth. Your truth." The largest screen displayed new footage of Julian's recent attempts to blame Ania for their failures, his cruel dismissal of her desperate pleas for help, and Ania's efforts to salvage her reputation with lies about both men. How quickly betrayers turn on each other when their schemes collapse. Liam continued as more evidence poured in: leaked emails, recorded conversations, financial records. Each revelation stripped away another layer of their carefully constructed facades. Julian rushed toward the nearest screen, demanding, "Shut this off." Security staff materialized and restrained him with professional efficiency. Ania sank to her knees, her mask clattering to the floor as her carefully reconstructed world crumbled. "Who are you? Why are you doing this?" she cried out. The screens went dark for a moment. Then Liam's face appeared, cold and composed. "You know who I am," he said simply. "I'm the worthless nobody who built the technology you tried to steal, the quiet coder you thought you could discard, the husband you betrayed." Julian struggled against the security staff as Liam continued, "Look around you, Julian. Look at what this pathetic programmer has accomplished. Your empire is gone, your reputation destroyed, and your partner in crime ruined. Who's pathetic now?" The screens began displaying news headlines about Styliverse's collapse. Julian's financial frauds, his failures, and each story included the full evidence Liam had gathered. He informed them, "The evidence has already been sent to journalists, regulatory agencies, and law enforcement. Your public humiliation tonight is just the beginning." As guests began leaving in disgust, former allies turned their backs, and potential investors shook their heads in revulsion. Anya whispered, "You destroyed us." Liam corrected softly, "No, you destroyed yourselves. I merely ensured you couldn't hide from the consequences." In the aftermath of the masquerade, news agencies exploded with the story, the scandal, the financial fraud, the calculated betrayal, and its spectacular exposure. Video clips circulated online showing Julian's rage and his inevitable collapse. In his control room, Liam watched the chaos unfold through his network of cameras and digital feeds. Julian paced in his empty office, phone pressed to his ear as he tried desperately to prevent the inevitable. "Hey, how are you? Did you think I wouldn't have contingencies? Backups? Ways to make you face your actions? I built our entire digital infrastructure, remember? You dismissed me as worthless." Liam's voice echoed over the speakers, cold and final. Anya sat in her apartment surrounded by printouts of news articles and social media reactions, each message cutting another tie. "Margaret, you have to help me reach him," she begged into the phone. But Margaret had already made her position clear. There would be no mercy, no second chances. The betrayers would face the full weight of their choices. Julian's remaining investors had pulled out completely. Federal investigators were opening inquiries into his financial dealings, and his attempts to contact potential employers were met with immediate rejection. A message appeared from his legal team. Divorce papers processed, all assets secured. Another from his financial analysts confirmed that target accounts were frozen and recovery of diverted funds was complete. Liam opened a secure channel to the Manor's audio system. "Time for the final stroke," he declared. "I warned you both. I gave you a chance to end this with simple divorce papers, but you chose to continue your betrayal." In his office, Julian froze as Liam continued. "Did you really think I wouldn't have contingencies? I built our entire digital infrastructure. Remember, you dismissed me as worthless." Julian's pleas fell on deaf ears. "No more manipulation. You're both going to live with the consequences of your choices. Everything you tried to take from me, my success, my reputation, my dignity, I have taken from you instead. And unlike you, I made sure it was permanent. You'll regret this." Julian threatened weakly, but Liam's laugh was cold. Empty threats from a fallen man. "Check your accounts, Julian. Check your contacts. Check your future prospects. You'll find them all gone. Forever." Switching to a private channel, he addressed Anya. "You said I was nothing without you. Now you get to be nothing without me." Her sob was cut off as he terminated the connection. On his screens, their separate despair played out in perfect synchronization. The mighty venture capitalist reduced to impotent rage, and the ambitious executive forced to face a future of closed doors and ruin. Liam initiated his final commands. Digital locks engaged, securing the evidence for future use if needed. Anonymous accounts were closed, leaving no trail back to him. The elaborate web he had woven to trap them now dissolved, its purpose fulfilled. He stood, stretching stiff muscles from hours of monitoring his victory. The quiet coder had transformed into a force of calculated vengeance, a deliverer of inescapable consequences. The betrayers had learned their lesson, and more importantly, they had revealed his true strength. The final screen showed the last text exchange between Julian and Anya. "Julian, this is your fault. You let him into our systems." Anya, "My fault. You promised to protect me. Now look at us." Julian, "We're done. Don't contact me again." Anya, "Julian, please, we can still." Liam smiled. They had thought him weak, dismissed his capabilities, mocked his quiet persistence. Now they understood. The most dangerous predators are the ones you never see coming. The silent ones who strike not with rage, but with calculated, unstoppable precision. He closed his laptop, picked up his coat, and walked out of the control room. Behind him, screens continued displaying the ruins of his enemies' lives. The serpent had struck, its venom had spread, and its targets would never recover. 5 years later, the glass-walled office on the 42nd floor of the Hayes Technology Tower offered a commanding view of the city skyline. Liam Hayes sat at his desk, reviewing quarterly reports from his company's latest AI venture. At 47, his features had sharpened, his dark hair now showing traces of distinguished gray at the temples. Success had refined him, but the cold calculation in his eyes remained unchanged. A notification popped up on his screen. Another article about Julian Vance's prison sentencing. The former venture capitalist had finally faced justice for years of financial fraud. The investigation Liam had triggered 5 years ago had uncovered decades of manipulation, leading to a 15-year sentence in federal prison. "Mr. Hayes," his assistant's voice came through the intercom. "Your mother is here for lunch." Margaret Hayes entered the office carrying a box from her bakery. At 70, she remained active in the business she had built from nothing, even though she now delegated most daily operations to trusted managers. The bakery had expanded into a successful chain, funded in part by her son's strategic investments. "Still working too hard?" she asked, setting down the box containing his favorite pastries. "Someone has to." Liam's smile was genuine, the rare smile he allowed himself. "How's the expansion going?" "The new locations are doing well. I suspect having Hayes Technologies backing helps with the financing," she replied. She studied her son carefully. "I saw the news about Julian Vance. Has he been taking his time?" "Not at all," Liam replied in a neutral tone. "It always comes." Margaret nodded slowly. "And Anya? Have you heard anything?" "My sources keep me informed." Liam pulled up a file on his tablet. "She's working as a junior sales associate at a small boutique in Phoenix, living in a studio apartment and trying to rebuild under her maiden name. The industry blacklisting remains effective." "The wound still bleeds, then?" "No, Mother." Liam's voice was calm. "The wound healed long ago. This isn't about pain anymore. It's about consequences." Margaret understood. Her son had emerged from betrayal not beaten, but transformed. The quiet coder had become a tech industry titan, his company specializing in cybersecurity and AI development. Hayes Technology was renowned for its ruthless efficiency and impeccable reliability, much like its founder. David Chen, the VP of development who had stood by Liam during the Styleverse collapse, had risen to prominence within Hayes Technology. His loyalty and brilliant mind had earned him a position of trust in Liam's inner circle, overseeing the company's most sensitive operations. "The quantum encryption protocol shows promise," David had said. "We're moving into testing next month," Liam agreed. Their lunch was interrupted by a news alert on Liam's screen. Another tech startup had collapsed amid accusations of fraud and mismanagement. "Some people never learn," he murmured as he read the details. Margaret watched his expression. "You had something to do with this. They approached me 6 months ago, seeking investment. During due diligence, I discovered their scheme," Liam replied coolly. "I simply ensured the developers learned the truth before it was too late." Always the protector of the quiet ones, someone has to be. After lunch, Margaret returned to her bakery, leaving Liam to his afternoon meetings. His calendar was filled with appointments with venture capital firms, tech developers, and security consultants. Hayes Technology had become a major player in the industry, known for backing innovative projects while ruthlessly exposing fraud and exploitation. Later that evening, Liam visited his private office at home, a sophisticated command center hidden behind biometric security. Multiple screens displayed news feeds, security monitoring, and project updates. One screen tracked individuals of interest. Julian now in his prison jumpsuit, a broken man facing years of confinement. Another showed Anya's modest life at the boutique. Her attempts to return to the fashion tech industry met with polite but firm rejections. Liam's phone buzzed with a message from David. Quantum protocol preliminary results looking good. Also, heads up, Anya tried to apply for a tech consulting position in Scottsdale, but her application mysteriously vanished from the system. Understood, Liam replied. Keep monitoring. He leaned back in his chair, contemplating the screens before him. The quiet coder who had been betrayed and underestimated now controlled a technology empire worth billions. His influence extended throughout the industry, though few understood the full extent of his power. A notification prompted him to check his encrypted email. A group of developers from a struggling startup were seeking protection from predatory investors. They had heard rumors about Hayes Technologies' role in exposing corporate exploitation. Liam began typing his response, offering them a lifeline while setting his investigative teams in motion. Another chance to ensure that what happened to him would never happen to others. His home office even contained a hidden wall safe, secured by multiple layers of protection, where he kept a USB drive containing the complete record of his revenge against Anya and Julian. He kept it not out of sentiment, but as a reminder, and as a template for future justice. A text message arrived from Margaret. Dinner on Sunday. Sarah mentioned she might stop by. Liam shook his head, both amused and annoyed by his mother's persistent matchmaking. Sarah Chen was brilliant, attractive, and understood the tech world intimately. But that path was closed. Romance meant vulnerability, and vulnerability led to betrayal. He had learned that lesson thoroughly, paid for in pain and rage, and emerged stronger. The man he had become had no room for such weaknesses. Instead, he had built something permanent. Hayes Technology wasn't just a company, it was a force for justice in an industry rife with exploitation. His influence touched countless lives, protecting those who, like him, preferred the quiet power of code to the flash and glamour of public attention. His phone buzzed again. Another group of developers seeking help, another potential fraud to expose, another chance to ensure that what happened to him never happened to others. As night fell, the screens continued their endless display of information. Somewhere in Phoenix, Anya closed up a small boutique and returned to her solitary life. In a federal prison, Julian sat staring at blank walls, his schemes turned to dust, and in his command center, Liam Hayes continued his work, ensuring that in the world of technology, the quiet ones would never again be powerless. Margaret's words from years ago echoed in his mind. The world isn't fair, but that doesn't mean we let it break us. He hadn't broken. He had transformed into someone colder, more purposeful. The betrayal that was meant to destroy him had instead forged him into a force that others now feared to cross. The next morning's newspaper would carry another story of corporate fraud exposed, another scheme unraveled, and another group of quiet developers protected from exploitation. Few would connect these events to the sophisticated security systems of Hayes Technology, and fewer still would trace them back to a story of betrayal and revenge from 5 years past. But in his hidden command center, surrounded by screens and servers, Liam Hayes allowed himself a small smile. The quiet ones were safe now, protected by one of their own, who had learned to turn silence into strength and vengeance into justice. The betrayed coder had become the defender of the silent, ensuring that those who exploited and discarded the quiet brilliance of others faced swift and inescapable consequences. It wasn't just revenge anymore. It was a revolution, changing the tech industry one exposed fraud at a time. And somewhere in the digital shadows, the serpent remained coiled, ready to strike at those who dared to follow in Julian and Anya's footsteps. The quiet coder had found his true purpose, and the world of technology would never be quite the same. A glimpse into other lives revealed that while Liam's transformation dominated the aftermath, others involved in the style of her scandal found their lives permanently altered. Margaret Hayes expanded her bakery chain into a successful regional business, using her experience and her son's strategic guidance to create opportunities for other struggling families. She never spoke to Anya again, but she kept track of her former daughter-in-law with a mixture of sadness and satisfaction. David Chan rose to prominence within Hayes Technology, his loyalty during the Styleverse crisis earning him a position of trust in Liam's inner circle. He helped develop the security systems that would become the company's hallmark, understanding better than most the importance of protecting those who worked in quiet dedication. Sarah Chen, despite Margaret's matchmaking attempts, maintained a purely professional relationship with Liam. She respected both his brilliance and his boundaries, focusing instead on revolutionizing Hayes Technology's development protocols. Under her leadership, the company became known for fostering collaborative innovation, while fiercely protecting its developers' interests. Julian's downfall continued even within prison walls. His attempts to manipulate fellow inmates and guards met with consistent failure, as if some invisible force ensured his every scheme backfired. His ex-wife refused to visit, his former friends denied knowing him, and his carefully hidden offshore accounts remained frustratingly out of reach. Anya's life became a study in consequence. Every attempt to rebuild was met with subtle but firm resistance. Job applications vanished, business proposals went unanswered, and potential partners withdrew without explanation. The fashion tech industry that had once celebrated her now pretended she didn't exist. The tech community itself changed, influenced by Hayes Technology's watchful presence. Companies learned to think twice before exploiting their developers, and investment firms grew wary of schemes that sacrificed technical talent for quick profits. A new ethics emerged, shaped by the quiet power of those who worked behind the scenes. The story of Styleverse's collapse and its aftermath became a whispered legend in tech circles. Few knew the full truth, but everyone understood the lesson. The quiet ones are no longer powerless. They have a defender now, someone who values their contributions and ensures that those who exploit them face the consequences. In his tower office, Liam Hayes continued his work, expanding his influence while maintaining his solitude. The betrayal that might have destroyed him had instead created something unprecedented, a force for justice in an industry that had long ignored it. The quiet coder had rewritten not just his own story, but the story of an entire industry. And so, in the digital shadows, the serpent remained vigilant, ready to strike at those who dared to exploit others. The quiet coder had become a silent guardian, ensuring that those who would use and discard the brilliance of others faced swift retribution. It wasn't merely about revenge. It was about revolution, protecting the quiet ones one exposed fraud at a time. The end was really just the beginning.